The Seahawks may be without their top receiver when they battle the Buffalo Bills on Sunday, but they've got some positive injury news as well heading into a key Week 8 matchup at Lumen Field. We'll be breaking it all down in our latest Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on Blue Friday by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s who are tuning in. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're in nearby Sumner, Washington, or down in Silver City, New Mexico, we appreciate each and every one of you. We are drawing closer to kickoff on Sunday's Seahawks-Bills. Some not so good injury news and some really positive injury news for us to dive into on Seattle's final injury report. And as we do every Friday, we're going to be game planning for a victory against the 5-2 Buffalo Bills. We've got picks to click and we've got game predictions in a jam-packed episode brought your way by our friends at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. As expected, the Seahawks may be without receiver DK Metcalf as he recovers from a grade 1 MCL sprain suffered last week in the win over the Falcons. The Seahawks listing him as doubtful, along with defensive tackle Cameron Young, who's also dealing with a knee injury. Typically, when we hear the tag doubtful, at least in my opinion, normally when a guy's doubtful, that usually tells me, well, there's a 99% chance that he's pretty much out. The only time I can remember in recent memory that the Seahawks played someone that was doubtful was way back in 2016 or 2017. It might have actually been 2015, but Bruce Irvin was doubtful and played against the Pittsburgh Steelers in that epic game that was at then named CenturyLink Field. But I can't remember a player being listed as doubtful that ended up playing in the game ever since then. It's very rare. And yet, at least with this one particular player and the fact that Mike McDonald today didn't come out and say, it's probably not going to play. He made it sound like this could still very much be a game time decision. DK Metcalf is wired differently than others, Nick. And so I'm actually going to go on a limb here. I'm going to make a bold prediction. I still think DK Metcalf is going to play in this game.
Well, we might differ in that, like you said, the statistics, I'm a big stats guy, trends guy, and probabilities guy. And just that is not in favor of DK Metcalf playing, obviously. And like you mentioned, he is a bit of a different player. Lots of guys in the past have been doubtful that have had that quote dog in him like DK. And a lot of them, in fact, most of them have not played even as doubtful. So, I'm not going to come here and say I think he's going to play like you, but of course we all hope he does. That obviously does increase the Seahawks' chances here. And Abe Lucas, I think, is one, not a big surprise. Some positive ones as well. Woolen not even listed, which is nice. Getting him back. And in fact, we were talking before the show about game predictions that might have swung me a different way with Woolen coming back. I think he's been that important to this team so far this year. And just with other things trending well. Trey Brown looking like he's trending back as well, which getting those two on top of what you've gotten from some reserve defensive backs, Josh Jobe and Kobe Bryant is still going to be out there filling in for Jenkins. But you like what you've seen so far, and adding those two back would be huge. And another one, George Fant is possibly being activated and getting him back at right tackle. Not that Mike Jarrell, you've talked about it all week, and we saw it on Sunday. Not that he was, a liability and completely terrible out there, given the circumstances he was thrown in, but getting George Fant back and just resetting that depth a little bit more on the right side of the offensive line will just be huge for this game, because this is a game against the Bills that really can set the tone for the next part of this schedule, this part of this season. And if you can win this game when you're a home underdog, that's a big boost. So getting some of these players back, yes, being down DK would stink, but I think overall there's a lot of positive developments too.
Yeah, if Metcalf does not play, the Seahawks are still going to have Tyler Lockett, Jack Smith, and Jake, but they've got really good depth at that position. Not to say that they won't miss Metcalf, because they certainly will, but this is still an offense that should be able to function without him in the short term. Again, though, I'm not putting it past number 14 to play. We'll see what ends up happening. It's just he is just programmed differently than most human beings, even the players in the NFL. So we'll see. I think there's a chance that he still plays even with that doubtful tag. But looking at those questionable players, getting Trey Brown back is certainly something to keep an eye on. He practiced on Friday, did not practice the rest of the week, but Mike McDonald sounded pretty optimistic. So you strength at the cornerback position. Maybe Nehemiah Pritchett doesn't play in this game. If that happens, maybe Josh Jobe gets a second week that he gets called up to the active roster. But there's two names that I specifically want to look at. You mentioned one of them, George Fant. The Seahawks do have a spot in their 53-man roster open now because they released Ty Okada yesterday. I've been told by a source that he's already been re-signed to the practice squad. So they didn't lose Ty Okada, but they do have a spot open that they can activate George Fant. But if they don't think George Fant is ready, the fact that he's listed as questionable tells me that they're still thinking about whether or not he's going to be ready to play in this game. Jarek Reed II is now in his second week of practice back from the PUP list, and he has looked really good based on what Mike McDonald has said. He was a full participant this week at practice. He's not even listed on this final injury report. So you release Ty Okada, it makes sense to just plug in Jarek Reed, who, no offense to Ty Okada, but Jarek Reed is a much more athletic player, much more versatile player that might even be able to jump in and play some snaps for you on defense right now with Rayshon Jenkins and is your reserve. So that is what I'm really looking forward to seeing is who ends up getting that last roster spot. Does Seattle make another move to activate both George Fant and Jarek Reed II? There's certainly some intrigue going into Saturday what the Seahawks are going to do on a number of these fronts.
Right. And obviously, I think there's a bit more intrigue, at least on the average fan, with George Fant being the right tackle. I mean, Jarek Reed would be nice, plug and play on special teams and can maybe give you a boost in the secondary if needed. But George Fant at right tackle, you want to have as solid of an offensive line here in this effort against the Bills. They have some pieces now. They're not exactly the most formidable pass rushing front seven, especially with injuries on their side, but you definitely want George Fant in there because at right now with Lucas down, George Fant's right now your best option that's possible to play in this game. So that's another one for me that is a nice big boost possibly with him coming back. And Cam Young, just a bummer, can't quite get going, has less than or just over 200 snaps on the defense in his career in 2 years, and just seems like every time it's a stop and start thing with him, which is a bummer too, especially with what you'd like to do along the interior defensive line against the run. So with all that going down, I'm going to go focus it's a bit more net positive with possibly the return of George Fant and the boost you get in the secondary, because boy, as we're going to talk about, you're going to need all the help you can get in the secondary.
And having Ken Walker III not be on this list too, Mike McDonald said he's not completely over his illness, but he was a full participant today and he looked really good. So look, the way he played last week in his flu game, even if he's a little under the weather on Sunday, I'd feel pretty good about handing the rock to KW9 and letting him rock and roll, get him involved in the passing game some. So him not being on this list at all, that is a big deal too. Him and Reek Woolen both being absent from this list is certainly a major positive for the Seahawks heading into this game against the Buffalo Bills between two playoff hopefuls. And if you watch the Rams last night, Seattle needs this game. They need to get this victory to fend off, because the Rams are coming to town the next weekend. They're going to be coming off a longer bye too, a mini bye, since they played on Thursday night. So Seattle needs this game. You got to keep your momentum going heading into that critical division matchup. When we come back next, how do the Seahawks beat the Buffalo Bills? We're going to get to our game plan Friday, diving into some X's and O's and some strategy on offense, defense, and special teams. We'll get to that up next here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, and Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you versus the numbers, and Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. They also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out. If your lineup isn't perfect, you can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Go to Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. This Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks is also brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after you've been drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedInNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedInNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're not satisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedInNFL and use the code LockedInNFL at checkout for 15% off. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, on Blue Friday by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. For your second listen, make sure to check out the new Locked On NFL, which is 2 times a day. You've got your morning espresso with Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, and then our good friend, Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars, going to give you the evening chatter around the NFL. Plenty of insight from our team hosts all across the league. Insight analysis you're looking for that you won't find anywhere else. That's Locked On NFL on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. The Seahawks looking to start another winning streak. They get the big W in Atlanta last week, and now they're coming back home. They have lost their last 2 games at Woolen Field. They're going to be looking to snap that losing streak and get a second straight win, this time with the Buffalo Bills making a rare appearance in the Pacific Northwest. And Nick, this is a Bills team that has won several of their games by big margins. They have had several large victories, including smashing the Jaguars early this year. Obviously, Jacksonville has not been good this season, but still, Buffalo has had several games where they have taken other teams behind the woodshed, and they've ended up winning by 20-plus points. They've also had a couple rough outings this year, though. So it's been a team that's been kind of up and down, and they certainly have been vulnerable at times. When you look at this matchup from the Seahawks offensive perspective, what do you think is key for them to have a chance to beat the Buffalo Bills on Sunday?
Well, one of the bigger stories out of Orchard Park is the health of their linebackers, especially Terrell Bernard. So you got to wonder, if the Seahawks can exploit that in the passing game. I do see that the Bills have allowed the second most receptions and receiving yards to running backs this year. So that's something to look at, especially with Ken Walker III, who apparently has superpowers when he doesn't feel good compared, when you saw what we had last week. So Balin Spector, I think, is going to be replacing Bernard on the linebacker spot for the Bills. And he allowed 35 receiving yards in 3 targets against the Titans of all offenses. So you'd like to see the Seahawks expose that. And going off of that, it's also nice to have time to throw. And Greg Rousseau is easily their best pass rusher. He's 34 pressures this year. The next highest Bill has 13, which is Ed Oliver. So hopefully with George Fant back, maybe won't be quite as tall of a task to neutralize Rousseau. But you definitely want to neutralize him. Don't let him be a single game wrecker, because if you can keep him at bay, this is not the most elite pass rushing defense for Buffalo. Geno is 23rd in the NFL in time to throw. Love to see that get boosted with perhaps the return of George Fant. But yeah, neutralizing their best pass rush option and also exposing their lack of depth at linebacker seems key.
Yeah, the linebacker position, the Bills have already ruled out Terrell Bernard. And this is a guy that last year had over 120 tackles and 6.5 sacks. He is a dynamic playmaker, an undersized linebacker, but he's really athletic and he's instinctive. So not having him out there, and oh, by the way, Matt Milano's been out all season, and he's one of the best linebackers in football. So this is a unit that's been ravaged by injuries. They're going to be very shorthanded in this game. You mentioned the numbers against running backs. They have given up the 6th most receptions to tight ends this year as well. So this feels like a game where the Seahawks should be able to attack the middle of the field, get those linebackers into one-on-one situations where they're trying to match up with Noah Fant, Ken Walker III, even A.J. Barner. You're putting them in matchups that favor your offense. And if you don't have DK Metcalf, you're going to have to lean on things like that to compensate. So I think this is a game you can get some quick to intermediate passes to your running backs, to your tight end, scheme to get them in those one-on-one situations that I think are favorable against Buffalo's backup linebackers that are going to be playing in this game. I think that is a strong recipe. That's kind of an extension of the run game when you're able to get your running backs and tight ends involved in the quick passing game. I think there are going to be opportunities there. You might even be able to get a play down the seam to Noah Fant at some point in this game. And that leads into my other point here. I know that Damar Hamlin is an amazing story. He's got an interception this year. There's been some moments he's played well, but both he and Taylor Rapp, they are solid players, but neither one of them is an elite or even a great athlete for the safety position. And this feels like an opponent. You're not going to be able to come out and just chuck the ball downfield, especially without DK Metcalf against this team. However, if you are able to run the football effectively and your intermediate to short passing game, especially those tight ends and running backs, is going, get some of that play action working off of it, you have got some opportunities to go over the top on Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin. And you can get some shot plays if you are able to set them up, because neither one of these guys, if they get beat, they don't have the speed to be able to recover. And Seattle is still going to have Tyler Lockett, Jack Smith, and Jigba. I think you could see Laviska Shenault potentially make a play downfield because of his athleticism. Noah Fant, as I mentioned, if you get him matched up on a safety down the seam, it feels like a game where if you can build up to that opportunity that you can get a shot play or two against these safeties. And I think it's going to be critical that they are able to do that in this football game.
And I know he's not like a true safety, but throwing Cam Lewis toward, talking about the middle of the field, he's actually leading the team, speaking of the Bills defense, in receiving yards allowed. He's bounced around a little bit, corner, slot corner, box, safety, he's bounced around, but where he's been, he has struggled in coverage at times. And 5'11", so you'd like that matchup perhaps even with the Jackson Smith and Jigba from the slot. So yeah, middle of the field could be a soft underbelly of the Bills, pretty much in all three levels. Maybe not quite so much on the defensive line, but certainly past the defensive line. That's a fairly nice soft underbelly there for the defense.
Switching over to the defensive side of the football. I was thinking about Josh Allen already, and immediately slippery comes to mind, which you don't normally say with a 240-pound quarterback, but that's Josh Allen. That's why he is one of the very best in the business. And we've talked about this a few recent games where we felt like the Seahawks needed to ramp up their aggressiveness in terms of bringing 5 rushers or bringing 6. This is not a game where you're going to see me advocating for that. When you look at Josh Allen's stats this year, he is tied for the most touchdown passes, 7 of them against the blitz this year. You can't afford to send extra rushers very often. You're going to have to be opportune with those chances and really sprinkle them in lightly. You got to tread lightly on that front. It is going to come down to Mike McDonald finding ways to orchestrate pressure with 4-man fronts. And maybe the Seahawks will be able to do that just with straight pass rushes because they have the dudes to be able to do it. But it's a game where you're going to have to mix in some sim pressures. You're going to have to find some creative ways to keep Josh Allen off balance without sending that extra rusher, because he has burned the blitz as much as any quarterback in the NFL this year. You are playing with fire if you do that. I'm not saying never blitz, but I would be hesitant to do it very much in this game. I think you got to blitz at your own peril. This is a game that you're going to have to find some creative ways to try to generate pressure while still only sending 4.
And I think the Seahawks do have the defensive line talent to pull that off with the right game plan. And that kind of goes into the next point. The interior offensive line of the Bills is vulnerable in some spots. We got Connor McGovern has got a 52.1 pass blocking grade at center. He has struggled a little bit in the pass blocking game in the interior. David Edwards, not great numbers either at guard. Osiris Torrance also has kind of been hit and miss. So in the interior offensive line of the Bills, you'd like that mismatch there. So using stunts confuse those three, with Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and Jaron Reed, you have three of the that trio is, I would say, I would put that trio of interior defensive linemen up against just about any interior defensive line in football, maybe minus one or two teams. And you have this flexibility, this versatility with those three. Get them in spots of conflict with that interior line and take advantage of that and get to Josh Allen, because I think 1 and 2 kind of go together. You can create some of that pressure with defensive line. You can do stunts without blitzing with your defensive line, alignments, and that kind of goes into Josh Allen being. It's so funny because he's built like Ben Roethlisberger, but also he's slippery. He's slippery. He's got 4.6 speed, maybe sub 4.6 speed when he gets going. And that's a tough customer, one of the tougher customers as far as quarterbacks to rush properly, because there is an improper way to rush against Josh Allen, because if you don't keep your lanes, we've seen it time and time again. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the business at making you pay.
And that's why the idea of mixing in stunts kind of scares me a little bit, because the plus side, you can get free rushers that can come right after Josh Allen. The downside is if it gets picked up, or if you end up with two guys that end up in a similar area, now you've got lanes for Josh Allen to take off. And he's been so good at that over the years. And this, to me, is the biggest key when you play the Buffalo Bills. I don't care what team we're talking about. I don't care what scheme we're talking about. Your pass rushers, it's weird because, when you're playing Lamar Jackson, I say you've got to be conservative with your pass rush. With Josh Allen, I'm going to say you've got to be aggressive yet grounded. And what I mean by that is you still want to get upfield. You still want to be able to push the pocket with outside rush, generate some of that inside pressure, and you want to make it that he ends up running into your guys on the outside. At the same time, you don't want to get too far upfield, because we know if there's lanes there, Josh Allen, not only is he going to take off and run, he's got 3 rushing touchdowns this year, over 300 rushing yards, but he's as dangerous as anybody at extending a play and then throwing the ball 70 yards downfield while he's fading out of bounds. He makes ridiculous throws that maybe no other quarterbacks in the NFL are going to be making. And if you want to put pressure on your secondary, let this guy get out of the pocket consistently and still be looking to throw the football, because there are going to be guys running open no matter how good your secondary is. And so those pass rushing lanes, the integrity, making sure that you close off those creases, they can't let him get out as a scrambler or let him take off up the pocket and run the football or extend plays as a passer. They have to limit his chances to do that. If you let Josh Allen play backyard sandlot football against you, it is going to be a long afternoon on Sunday, especially if the weather acts up as it's supposed to with rain. That is something that could really make things difficult for the Seahawks in this game against a talented Bills squad. When we come back, we've got picks to click and game predictions as the Seahawks gear up to face the Bills at Lumen Field. Don't go away. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends at FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play from across the league, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can bet on everything from Ken Walker III scoring a rushing touchdown against the Bills to Amari Cooper being the first player with a 30-plus yard reception, or you can bet on the Seahawks covering a 3-point spread as underdogs. Just throw in the $5 bet and you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined here on Blue Friday by my co-host here, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s. As always, we greatly appreciate you listening in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks looking to start a winning streak. The Bills coming to town to Lumen Field on Sunday afternoon with a 5-2 record. This would certainly be a huge win for the Seahawks, and it would keep them in sole possession of first place in the NFC West. Nick, let's talk picks to click. And the last time you and I did this, remember Rob actually joined me for the Thursday night game, but we've had some interesting results this year. It's been kind of up and down for both of us on offense. Defense, we've been hitting almost every week. We've been playing with house money here. On the offensive side of the ball, Who are you singling out as your pick to click in this game?
Well, once again, I'm going to go low-hanging fruit with, DK Metcalf maybe out, likely out, not 100% out, but more than likely. How about the veteran stepping up? Tyler Lockett. He's actually, I was looking at his career against the Bills, just 2 games, very quiet, 5 catches for 57 yards, no touchdowns in 2 games. And, without Metcalf on there, Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba are your clear number, 1, 2, 1A, 1B receivers. This year, I'm not saying he's been super quiet. He's had some really good moments, really good games, but I think he's below his, average yards per game rate, his career rate so far this year. I think this is a game where I could see him going for 75 plus and a touchdown. He only has 1 touchdown so far this year. I think this is a game where he can get going. Obviously, the absence of DK Metcalf might benefit him as far as just target volume. So that'll also help. So I think this is going to be a nice, pick-me-up game for Tyler Lockett. Give me 75 yards and a touchdown.
I've had a pretty good year with picks to click, but the one big miss that I had on offense earlier this year was when I picked Noah Fant, and I believe that was the Patriots game that I picked Noah Fant. And I went back and looked. I have picked in the last 2 years. This is how much of a nerd that I am, Nick. I went back and looked at all of our picks to click last year. I've picked Noah Fant 4 times the last 2 seasons. He has had 6 combined catches and no touchdowns in those games. So my better judgment is saying stay away from Noah Fant, but I can't do it. At some point, something's got to give, and this curse that seems to be upon me with picking him has got to end. I'm going with Noah Fant, and I mentioned it earlier. This Bills defense, they have given up the 6th most receptions to tight ends in the NFL this year. You're probably not going to have DK Metcalf, though, like I said, I'm still skeptical about that. I think DK is the one guy that could maybe play on Sunday with a doubtful designation, but assuming that he's not playing in this game, you're going to need somebody to help pick up the slack. And I know Lockett and Smith and Jigba are going to get more targets, but Noah Fant had 64 receiving yards last week. He had 6 catches against the 49ers. He's become a bigger part of this offense in recent weeks. So look, historically, this has been a terrible selection for me on picks to click, but I am going to roll with Noah Fant once again and hope that this time, the 5th time, is a charm and we get some production. In fact, I'm going to go as far as saying that Noah Fant is finally going to score a touchdown, which he hasn't done since the 2022 season. It has been a long time. He's going to end that drought and find the end zone in this game against the Buffalo Bills. So I'm going with Noah Fant. Let's hope that finally some good luck comes with this selection. Okay, on the defensive side of the football, dealing with Josh Allen, Amari Cooper, and all the weapons that the Buffalo Bills have, who is your pick to click on defense and why?
Well, speaking of curses, I think I cursed Devin Witherspoon last week. Even though the defense had a decent showing, he actually had one of his lower graded games per Pro Football Focus of his entire career. And I've been pounding the table for Spoon. I'm going to call this right now. I'm picking him every single week until he gets a sack or an interception. And I don't think there's any doubt right now that there's a bit of a lull in his season. It's still no sacks, no picks, just 1 pass breakup. And coming off of, again, a poorly graded game. Now we can get into the grades and how much, stock there is, but I'm still going short of calling it a sophomore slump because he's still grading out 30th out of 120 qualified corners. But he still is just lacking that splash, that wow game, like the New York Giants game last year. And right now, if the season ended, let's be honest, he probably wouldn't be on Pro Bowl roster right now if the season ended today. I'm going to go with a wow game. I think what better game than to do that than against Josh Allen. I'm calling it Devin Witherspoon gets his first pick of the year, which would also, of course, be Josh Allen's first pick of the year. So give me Devin Witherspoon. Which is
crazy to me because he has thrown a lot of picks in his career. It's insane to me. This feels like one of those something's got to give games on that front too. Can you find a way to get some of those old habits where Josh Allen likes to throw into double and triple coverage to come back? And there's been some close calls this year, but it's an incredible stretch here with no picks so far this season for Josh Allen. Okay, it's game prediction time. And this is one of those where, Nick, I'm not going to say that it's kept me up at night because I'm to the point in my life where I'm not going to say that anything in football makes me stay up at night. But whatever that next tier down, this has been one I've been very torn on because part of me is saying, look, Josh Allen, best quarterback that the Seahawks have played so far this year, his mobility, they've got a number 1 receiver for him now. This defense has been opportunistic. You're missing your best receiver. There's a lot of reasons to think Seattle can't win this game. But at the same time, there are also a lot of variables that seem to be working against the Buffalo Bills and one of their best defensive players, and Terrell Bernard, not being available in this game. So I'm curious for your thoughts going into this game, where you stand on whether or not the Seahawks get it done on Sunday or if they drop to 4-4.
Well, if you go back and look at the last time the Seahawks were a home underdog against the non-49ers, I hate that we have to make that a different category. But that's for another day. Against anyone not named the 49ers, the last time they were a home dog was the Philadelphia Eagles game, Monday Night Football last year in December, and the Seahawks shocked the world with Drew Lock. And so, and this Sunday is going to be, I think the comments mentioned it's going to be a bit wet and blustery in Seattle on Sunday, and so that could lead to some lower scoring, some weirdness. I actually like Woolen coming back. That actually was a huge swing in the Seahawks direction for me. And Seahawks are coming off a big road win, kind of a reassurance that they're headed the right direction, kind of a right the ship kind of win. I like the vibes with the Ernest Jones trade. So let's get weird the weekend before Halloween here. So I'm going to go with the Seahawks win on the last second field goal. They're down 20-19 late. They get a one last drive, get in field goal range. Jason Myers hits it. Seahawks win 22-20.
I'm seeing a few more points in this game, and I'm going to tie my selection for pick to click on defense. I did this on purpose instead of just describing what was going to happen. Look, I think Ernest Jones is an absolute game changer for this defense. And I love the fact that he has just played against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. And he had some good plays in that game. He had a few that got away from him. And he's had a chance to go back and look at that film. And now he's going to be playing in a different defense. But still, he's played against Josh Allen less than a week ago. His ability to come up as a run defender and also a blitzer, I think some sim pressures with him coming after Josh Allen are going to be in the cookbook for Mike McDonald. I think he's going to get his first sack of the year, and I think he's going to get double-digit tackles. I think that ends up being the difference in this game. I think there's going to be a few more points than you're anticipating. I would have gone more if not for the weather. I do think the rain is going to impact that a little bit, but I'm going to go with 27-25 Seahawks, kind of an odd score. I could see this being a game where an extra point gets missed or a team goes for two and misses it. And there's going to be some weird scores because of the weather. And I just think the Seahawks, I'm with you. It's going to be very late in the game. They're going to find a way to score. I'm actually going to say it's a touchdown that wins this game late for the Seahawks. But I think that adding Ernest Jones to the equation, he's going to come through with a few plays. The run defense is going to be rock solid. He's going to be able to go after Josh Allen a few times when he takes off and runs. He doesn't miss many tackles. I think that his arrival is the difference in the game between two very evenly matched teams. I think the Seahawks will be able to take advantage of the linebacker injuries as well. I think it's a very close game, but I've got Seattle winning by 2 as well. We shall see what happens. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at NickLee51. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back on Sunday, it'll be our weekly post-game show. Connor Benintendi and I will be breaking down the key storylines, hopefully coming out of a Seahawks victory. We'll have our game balls, 3 up, 3 down, and more. Make sure that you're listening in a few hours after the final play at Lumen Field. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and go Hawks.